The stars were dying one by one. Captain Minho Kim watched the holographic display in the bridge of his ship, the horizon's edge. Red dots marked dead worlds across the galaxy. Each dot represented millions of lives lost to the Vorthak Empire. The alien fleet moved like a plague through space, leaving nothing but ash behind. "Sir, we're getting another distress signal," said his communications officer. The young woman's voice shook as she spoke. "It's from the Bellari system. They're asking for help." Minho closed his eyes. The Bellari were peaceful traders who had never hurt anyone. Their cities floated in the clouds of their gas-giant homeworld, beautiful and defenseless. "How long do they have?" "The Vorthak fleet. We'll reach them in 6 hours." 6 hours. That was longer than most worlds got. The Kelthera had lasted only 3 days. The mighty Nexari, with all their advanced technology, managed 5 days before their planets turned to glass. The Vorthak were not like other conquerors. They did not want slaves or tribute. They wanted everything dead. Their biomechanical ships grew stronger after each battle, learning from their enemies. No species had found a way to stop them. "Set course for Earth," Minho said. His crew looked at him with surprise, but he had made his choice. "We cannot help the Bellari, but we can warn our people." The journey to Earth took 3 weeks. During that time, 7 more star systems went silent. The Vorthak fleet was huge, over 3,000 ships, each one the size of a city. They moved in perfect formation, like a dark cloud spreading across the galaxy. When the horizon's edge finally reached Earth, Minho went straight to Federation Command. The building was full of panic. Admirals and generals ran between meetings, their faces pale with fear. Everyone knew the Vorthak were coming. In the main briefing room, Admiral Jisu Park stood before a large screen showing the galaxy map. The red zone of Vorthak control grew larger every day. It now reached almost to the edge of human space. "The outer colonies are already evacuating," Admiral Park said to the crowded room. "But we cannot move everyone. Earth has 8 billion people. Where would they go?" "We fight," said General Dong Yun Yu from the back of the room. "We make our stand here." "With what?" asked another officer. "Our entire fleet has maybe 200 ships. The Vorthak have 15 times that number." Minho stepped forward. He had seen the Vorthak ships up close when he rescued survivors from the Kepler colony. The memory still gave him nightmares. "I have footage from Kepler," he said. "You need to see what we're facing." The lights dimmed and the screen showed the ruins of what had been a thriving human colony. Cities that once held millions were now empty craters. The orbital shipyards floated in pieces. Even the asteroids had been cracked open and stripped bare. "They took everything," Minho explained. "Not just the people and buildings. They harvested the metals from the ground, the water from the oceans, even the atmosphere. There's nothing left but a dead rock." The room fell silent. Everyone understood now. This was not a war for territory or resources. This was extinction. "How long do we have?" Admiral Park asked. "Intelligence says 6 months," replied Colonel Boyong Shin. "Maybe less if they decide to move faster. 6 months to prepare for the end of humanity." The debates went on for hours. Some wanted to scatter the fleet, hit the Vorthak from different directions. Others suggested building massive defense stations around Earth. A few even talked about surrendering and hoping for mercy. But everyone knew the truth. The Vorthak did not show mercy. They had never left survivors on any world they conquered. The human race had 6 months to live. As the meeting broke up, Admiral Park pulled Minho aside. "I need you to take a message to the Outer Rim fleets," she said. "Tell them to fall back to the Threshold Gate. If we're going to make a stand, it has to be there." The Threshold Gate was the only hyperspace route large enough for the Vorthak fleet to use. It was a natural bottleneck, the perfect place for a last battle. But even there, the humans would be outnumbered 15 to 1. "What about the civilian ships?" Minho asked. "Send them deeper into human space. Maybe some will survive long enough to find a new home." As Minho prepared to leave Earth again, he visited his family one last time. His parents lived in a small house by the ocean, the same house where he had grown up. His father was working in the garden when Minho arrived. "The news says we're at war," his father said without looking up from his vegetables. "Yes," Minho replied. "It's bad, Dad." His father finally stood up, brushing dirt from his hands. He was old now, his hair white and his back bent. But his eyes were still sharp. "Your grandfather fought in the last war Earth faced. He told me something I never forgot." "What was that?" "He said the hardest battles are not fought by the strongest people. They're fought by the people who refuse to give up." His father put a hand on Minho's shoulder. "Whatever comes, son, don't give up." The next morning, Minho's ship left Earth, orbit. Behind him, the planet looked peaceful and beautiful, a blue marble floating in space. It was hard to believe that in 6 months it might be just another dead rock. As the horizon's edge jumped to hyperspace, Minho's radio officer picked up a transmission. It was being broadcast on all emergency frequencies. "This is Captain Sunho Lee of the destroyer Defiant," the voice said. "I'm holding position at the threshold gate. If they want Earth, they'll have to go through me first." Minho smiled despite everything. His father was right. The hardest battles were not fought by the strongest people. They were fought by the people who refused to give up. And somewhere out there, at the edge of human space, Captain Sunho Lee was getting ready to prove it. Captain Sunho Lee was supposed to be going home. His daughter Yuna was turning 8 years old in 3 days. He had promised to be there for her birthday party. She wanted a cake shaped like a spaceship and had made him promise to tell all her friends about his adventures among the stars. Instead, he sat in the captain's chair of the destroyer Defiant, staring at the massive ring of the threshold gate. The ancient structure was 10 kilometers across, built by a long-dead race. It was the only way for large fleets to travel quickly between this part of the galaxy and Earth. "Sir, incoming message from Fleet Command," said Communications Officer Jamin Park. The young man looked nervous. Everyone had heard the reports about the Vorthak fleet. "Put it through," Sunho replied. Admiral Jisoo Park's face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired, older than her 50 years. "Captain Lee, I'm ordering you to fall back to Earth immediately." "With respect, Admiral, I decline," Sunho said calmly. "This is not a request, Captain. The Vorthak fleet has over 3,000 ships. You have one." Sunho leaned forward in his chair. "Which is exactly why I need to be here. If even one of their ships gets through this gate, they can start hitting our colonies. Someone has to slow them down." "Sunho," the Admiral said, using his first name. "This is suicide. Your crew has families too." "I know." Sunho looked around his bridge. Lieutenant Hyunjin Choi at the tactical station was only 25, with a wife and baby son back on Mars. Chief Engineer Min Ji-song had been looking forward to retirement next year. Weapons Specialist Tae-hyung Kang was planning to marry his girlfriend when they got back to Earth. "I've given my crew the choice," Sunho continued. "Anyone who wants to leave can take the shuttle back to the fleet. No one will think less of them." "Admiral," Park was quiet for a moment. "How many are staying?" "All of them." The Admiral closed her eyes. "The main fleet is still 3 weeks out. Intelligence says the Vorthak will reach you in 4 days. Then we hold for 4 days." "Sunho." "Admiral, with respect, I have work to do." Lee out. The screen went dark. The bridge was silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Finally, Lieutenant Hyunjin Choi spoke up. "Captain, the crew would like to send messages home, just in case." Sunho nodded. "Tell everyone they have 2 hours. After that, we focus on the job." As his crew sent their final messages to loved ones, Sunho walked through the ship. The Defiant was a Resolute-class destroyer, 30 years old, but built to last. She had fought in the Centauri border wars and the Titan Rebellion. Her hull was scarred from a dozen battles, but her engines were strong and her weapons deadly. In engineering, Chief Min Ji-song was running diagnostics on every system. She was a small woman with gray hair and quick hands. She had served on the Defiant for 15 years and knew every bolt and wire on the ship. "How are we looking?" Sunho asked. "All systems green," Minji replied without looking up from her console. "I've boosted power to the weapons and shields. We're running at 110% normal capacity. Can the engines handle it? For a while, maybe a day or two before we start having problems. Sunho patted her shoulder. Make it last as long as you can. In the weapons bay, Taehyung Kang was loading every missile tube and checking every laser cannon. He was a big man with steady hands and a calm voice. He had joined the crew 5 years ago and quickly became the best weapons officer Sunho had ever seen. What's our ammunition situation? Sunho asked. Full load, Taehyung replied. 600 missiles, full charge on all energy weapons. I've also prepared some surprises. What kind of surprises? Taehyung grinned. The kind that make big explosions. As Sunho continued his tour, he found his crew preparing in their own ways. Some were praying in the chapel. Others were writing in journals or looking at pictures of home. A few were sleeping, saving their strength for what was coming. In his own cabin, Sunho sat down to record a message for his family. He stared at the camera for a long time before starting to speak. Hello, my loves. If you're watching this, it means I won't be coming home for Yuna's birthday. He paused, trying to find the right words. I want you both to know that everything I do for you, for our family, for our world, for our future. He thought about his daughter's smile, about his wife Yoonji's laugh. He thought about all the things he would miss, birthday parties and school plays, quiet dinners and lazy Sunday mornings. Yuna, Daddy won't be there to see you blow out your candles, but I want you to make a wish anyway. Wish for a world where little girls can have birthday parties without being afraid of monsters in the dark. That's what Daddy is fighting for. When he finished recording, Sunho sealed the message in the ship's black box. If the Defiant was destroyed, at least his family would know why he stayed. 4 hours later, Sensor Officer Youngmin Kim called out from his station. Captain, I'm detecting hyperspace signatures, multiple contacts coming through the outer system. Sunho returned to the bridge and took his seat. How many? 50 ships, sir. They're Vorthak scouts. 50 ships. Even the scouts outnumbered him 50-1. But Sunho had chosen this position carefully. The threshold gate sat in the middle of an asteroid field, surrounded by the broken remains of an ancient planet. The rocks would provide cover and limit the enemy's ability to surround him. All hands. Battle stations. Sunho announced over the ship's intercom. This is Captain Lee. In a few hours, we're going to face an enemy that has conquered 200 worlds. They think we'll run or surrender like everyone else has. They're wrong. He stood up from his chair and looked around the bridge at his crew. These were good people, brave people. They deserved better than to die so far from home. Today we show the galaxy what it means to be human, Sunho said. We show them that some lines cannot be crossed, that some things are worth dying for. We are the shield that protects Earth. We are the sword that strikes back at the darkness. The Vorthak scouts were getting closer. Soon, the real battle would begin. We are the crew of the Defiant, Sunho concluded, and we will not yield. The Vorthak scout ships emerged from hyperspace like sharks smelling blood. Admiral Krixtal watched from the bridge of his flagship as his sensors analyzed the single human vessel waiting by the threshold gate. The ship was small, primitive, and alone. This would be over quickly. Analysis complete, reported his tactical officer. The vessel is a human destroyer, approximately 800 crew members, standard weapons and defenses for their technology level. Krixtal's 4 arms moved in a gesture of dismissal. One ship. The humans send one ship to stop the might of the Vorthak Empire. His voice carried the sound of grinding metal, typical of his species. The Vorthak had conquered over 200 worlds. Each time, the enemy sent fleets to meet them. Large fleets, with hundreds of ships all following predictable patterns. The Vorthak would analyze their tactics, adapt their own strategies, and crush the opposition within hours. But this was different. One ship. Open communications with the human vessel, Krixtal ordered. This would be amusing. On the bridge of the Defiant, Captain Sunho Lee straightened his uniform as the alien face appeared on his screen. The Vorthak admiral was tall and thin with gray skin and 4 arms. His eyes glowed red in his skull-like face. Human, Krixtal spoke in perfect English. The Vorthak learned languages as easily as they learned battle tactics. I am Admiral Krixtal of the Vorthak Empire. You will surrender your vessel immediately and prepare to be boarded. Sunho smiled politely. Admiral Krixtal, I am Captain Sunho Lee of the Terran Federation destroyer Defiant. I appreciate your introduction, but I'm afraid I must respectfully decline your request. Krixtal's red eyes flickered with surprise. No species had ever declined. Surrender. Perhaps you do not understand your situation, human. You face 50 ships of the Vorthak fleet. Resistance is pointless. I understand perfectly, Sunho replied. You're not welcome in our neighborhood. I suggest you turn around and go home. For several seconds, Krixtal stared at the human captain. This was unprecedented. Every other species had begged for mercy or tried to negotiate. This human was being polite. You have 1 hour to reconsider, Krixtal finally said. After that, we will destroy you. Thank you for the hour, Sunho said pleasantly. We'll use it wisely. The communication ended. On the Vorthak flagship, the bridge crew looked at their admiral with confusion. In 300 years of conquest, nothing like this had ever happened. Should we attack immediately? Asked the tactical officer. No, Krixtal said slowly. 1 hour. Let them think about their deaths. It will make their fear taste sweeter. On the Defiant, Lieutenant Hyunjin Choi was already working on targeting solutions. Captain, I've identified their command ship. It's the largest one in the center of their formation. Good. What about the asteroids? Chief Engineer Minji Song pulled up a tactical display. I've mapped 17 large rocks between us and them. We can use them for cover, but they can also use them to hide their approach. Weapons Specialist Taehyung Kang was grinning as he prepared his surprises. Captain, I've loaded our torpedo tubes with something special. Instead of regular warheads, I've packed them with mining charges from the ship's emergency supplies. Mining charges? They're designed to crack asteroids. Against ship hulls, they should make quite a mess. Sunho nodded. What's our plan? Hyunjin pointed to the tactical display. They'll probably try to surround us, standard Vorthak tactics, but the asteroid field limits their movement. If we stay mobile and use the rocks for cover, we can force them to come at us in smaller groups. They'll adapt quickly, warned Sensor Officer Youngmin Kim. Intelligence reports say they learn from every engagement. Then we make sure every engagement is different, Sunho replied. The hour passed quickly. When time was up, Admiral Krixtal opened communications again. Well, human, have you reconsidered? Actually, yes, Sunho said. I've decided you definitely need to leave. Krixtal's expression darkened. Then you will die. Maybe, Sunho agreed, but you'll have to work for it. The first Vorthak ships moved forward in perfect formation. 20 vessels spread out in a hunting pattern, designed to trap their prey between overlapping fields of fire. It was the same formation they had used to destroy the Nexari fleet, but the Defiant didn't behave like other ships. Instead of running or trying to fight from a distance, Captain Sunho Lee did something no other species had ever tried. He charged straight at the enemy formation. All power to engines, Sunho shouted as the Defiant accelerated toward the Vorthak ships. Minji, I need everything you've got. The old destroyer shot forward like a bullet, using the gravity of a large asteroid to slingshot around behind the enemy ships. The sudden maneuver caught the Vorthak completely off guard. Fire! Taehyung called out as they swept past the first enemy vessel. The Defiant's missiles slammed into the Vorthak ship's hull, but these weren't ordinary missiles. The mining charges exploded with tremendous force designed to shatter solid rock. Against the biomechanical hull of the alien ship, the effect was devastating. The Vorthak vessel split apart like a broken egg. On the alien flagship, Admiral Krixtal watched in shock as one of his ships died. Impossible, he whispered. But the Defiant was already moving again. Using the asteroid field like a three-dimensional maze, the human ship appeared and disappeared, striking from unexpected angles. Every time the Vorthak tried to predict where it would go next, it went somewhere else. Their tactics make no sense, reported the tactical officer. They should be fighting defensively, but they keep attacking. They're using kamikaze runs, said another officer, but they pull away at the last second. Krixtal studied the battle display. The human ship was using maneuvers that should have been suicidal. No crew could survive the G-forces of those turns. Yet somehow they kept fighting. Analyze their flight patterns, he ordered. Sir, there are no patterns. They appear to be making random choices. Random. The word sent a chill through Krixtal's body. The Vorthak Empire was built on order, on predictability. Their adaptive technology worked by finding patterns in enemy behavior. But how could they adapt to something that had no pattern? The battle raged for 6 hours. The Defiant darted between asteroids, using everything from garbage to spare parts as weapons. Chief Engineer Minji Song kept the ship running at impossible speeds while weapons specialist Taehyung Kang turned their waste disposal system into a makeshift cannon. When it was over, 12 Vorthak ships were destroyed, and 20 more were damaged. The remaining vessels retreated to regroup, something that had never happened in Vorthak military history. On the Defiance bridge, the crew was exhausted but amazed. They had actually hurt the mighty Vorthak Empire. Damage report, Sunho called. Out. Hull breaches on 6 decks, reported Minji. Main engines down to 40% capacity, but we're still flying. Medical Officer Su-Young Lee's voice came over the intercom. 14 dead, 37 wounded, but morale is high, Captain. Sunho looked around his battered bridge. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the air smelled of smoke. But his crew was smiling. Good work, everyone, he said. But this was just the scout fleet. The real battle hasn't started yet. Communications Officer Jamin Park looked up from his station. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Vorthak flagship. Admiral Krixtal appeared on screen again, but this time he looked different, uncertain. Human, he said slowly. What are you? Sunho smiled. We're the people you should have left alone. 3 days passed in tense silence. The Defiant floated among the asteroids near the threshold gate, her crew working frantically to repair the damage from their first battle. Welding torches sparked in the darkness as they patched hull breaches and replaced damaged systems. Captain Sunho Lee stood in the observation deck watching his people work. They had done the impossible. They had made the Vorthak Empire bleed. But everyone knew the real test was coming. Captain, Chief Engineer Minji Song called over the intercom. You need to see this. Sunho made his way to engineering, where Minji was studying pieces of wreckage they had salvaged from destroyed Vorthak ships. The alien technology looked like a mixture of metal and living tissue, pulsing with its own light. It's biomechanical, Minji explained, pointing to the organic-looking sections. The ship hulls actually heal themselves over time. But look at this. She had isolated a section that had been hit by their mining charge missiles. Instead of healing, the organic tissue was dead and black. The mining charges don't just break the metal, Minji said with excitement. They poison the biological parts. The ships can't repair themselves where we hit them. It was their first real advantage against an enemy that seemed impossible to kill. Can we make more mining charges? Sunho asked. I've been working on it. We can convert about half our remaining missiles. It won't be enough to stop 3,000 ships, but every little bit helps. As Minji worked on the weapons, the rest of the crew prepared the ship for the coming storm. Lieutenant Hyunjin Choi programmed new tactical routines into their computers. Weapons specialist Taehyung Kang welded armor plates from destroyed Vorthak ships over their most vital systems. On Earth, Dr. Seoyoung Nam worked day and night on something called Project Prometheus. The theory was simple but untested. Human consciousness patterns were so chaotic and unpredictable that they might disrupt the Vorthak's biomechanical systems. The problem was making it work. The device needed a human mind to guide it, and the Ayami process would probably kill whoever volunteered. Even worse, they had no idea if it would actually affect the aliens. The prototype is ready, Dr. Nam reported to Admiral Jisoo Park, but we need to get it to Captain Lee. Our fastest courier ship is already on the way, the Admiral replied. It will reach the threshold gate in 4 days. Will the Defiant last that long? Admiral Park looked at the tactical display showing the approaching Vorthak fleet. 3,000 ships, the largest armada ever assembled. I honestly don't know. On the 3rd day, Sensor Officer Youngman Kim's console lit up with alarms. Captain, massive hyperspace signatures detected. The main Vorthak fleet is coming through. Sunho ran to the bridge as his crew took their battle stations. Through the viewports, space itself seemed to tear open as the alien fleet emerged from hyperspace. Ship after ship appeared, each one massive and deadly. 3,000 vessels filled the space around the threshold gate. They moved in perfect formation, blotting out the stars. At their center was the largest ship anyone had ever seen. Admiral Krixtal's flagship, the Dominator. "Dear God," whispered Communications Officer Jamin Park. The Vorthak fleet arranged itself in a great sphere around the human destroyer. Every weapon in the armada was pointed at the tiny Defiant. It looked like a single candle surrounded by a hurricane. Admiral Krixtal's face appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Sunho could see hundreds of alien officers working at control stations. "Captain Lee," the Admiral said. His voice was different now, colder and more careful. "I have brought the full might of the Vorthak Empire to deal with you personally. Surrender now, and I promise your death will be quick." Sunho looked around his bridge. His crew was scared. Anyone would be. But they were still at their posts. Lieutenant Hyunjin Choi was running final checks on their weapons. Chief Engineer Minji Song was pushing their engines past all safety limits. They were ready to die, but they would not surrender. "Admiral Krixtal," Sunho replied calmly, "I appreciate the personal attention, but my answer is the same as before. You're not welcome here." "Then you will die with honor," Krixtal said. For the first time, there was something like respect in his voice. "Attack pattern Omega. All ships fire at will." The space around the Defiant erupted in light as 3,000 Vorthak ships opened fire at once. Energy beams and missiles filled the void, enough firepower to destroy a planet. But the Defiant was no longer where they expected it to be. "Now!" Sunho shouted. Chief Engineer Minji Song had been preparing for this moment for 3 days. Using every trick she had learned in 30 years of service, she pushed the ship's engines beyond their design limits. The Defiant shot forward, like a comet, diving straight into the heart of the Vorthak formation. The aliens had expected the human ship to run or hide. Instead, it charged directly at their flagship, accelerating to impossible speeds. The crew of the Defiant endured crushing G-forces that would have killed most alien species, but humans had evolved on a high-gravity world. They could take punishment that others could not. "Fire everything!" Taehyung called out as they swept past the first line of enemy ships. The Defiant's weapons lit up the darkness. Mining charge missiles tore into biomechanical hulls while laser cannons carved through alien armor. But more importantly, the human ship's suicide charge had broken something that had never been broken before: a Vorthak formation. Impossible. Admiral Krixtal shouted as his perfect battle line collapsed. Ships scattered to avoid the charging destroyer, creating gaps and confusion. "Reform the attack pattern." But reforming took time, and Captain Sunho Lee was not going to give them time. The Defiant disappeared into the asteroid field, using the floating rocks as cover. When Vorthak ships followed, they found themselves in a maze where their superior numbers meant nothing. In the narrow spaces between asteroids, it was ship against ship, and the humans had proven they could win those fights. "They're using our own tactics against us," reported a Vorthak tactical officer, "drawing us into confined spaces where we cannot use our numbers." "Then we blast the asteroids," Krixtal ordered. "Destroy everything, leave them nowhere to hide." It was a sound plan, but it had one problem. While the Vorthak ships were busy destroying rocks, the Defiant was destroying them. The human ship struck like lightning, appearing from behind cover to fire its deadly mining charges, then vanishing again before the aliens could respond. For the first time in their history, the Vorthak Empire was being outfought by an inferior force. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "we've lost 30 ships in the last hour. Their hit-and-run tactics are extremely effective in this environment. Admiral Krickstall studied the battle display. The human ship was using the asteroid field like a three-dimensional city, darting through passages too narrow for his larger vessels. Every time his ships tried to follow, they found themselves trapped in corridors of rock, perfect targets for human weapons. "Pull back to minimum engagement range," he finally ordered. "We'll starve them out." But even as his ships retreated, Krickstall knew something had changed. The Vorthak Empire's reputation was built on swift, overwhelming victories. Now they were being forced to retreat by a single human destroyer. Word of the battle would spread throughout the galaxy. Other species would hear that the mighty Vorthak could be defied, could be hurt, could be forced to run. On the bridge of the Defiant, Captain Sunho Lee watched the alien fleet pull back to a safe distance. His ship was battered, but still fighting. Half his crew was dead or wounded, but the survivors were grinning with fierce pride. They had done something no one in the galaxy thought possible. They had made the Vorthak Empire afraid. The battle that followed lasted 18 hours and became the longest engagement in Vorthak military history. Captain Sunho Lee had turned the Defiant into a ghost. The battered destroyer appeared and vanished among the asteroids like a phantom, striking without warning and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Every attack was different, every approach unexpected. "Target their sensor arrays," Sunho called out as they swept past another Vorthak cruiser. "If they can't see us coming, they can't adapt to our tactics." Weapons specialist Taehyung Kang had become an artist of destruction. He used everything on the ship as a weapon: spare parts fired from the torpedo tubes, garbage shot from the waste disposal, even their emergency flares turned into blinding distractions. "Captain, I'm out of mining charges," Taehyung reported, "but I've got an idea." He showed Sunho a display of their remaining supplies. "If we vent our reactor coolant and ignite it with a laser burst, we can create a plasma cloud. It won't destroy their ships, but it will blind their sensors for several minutes." "Do it." The Defiant released a glowing cloud of superheated gas that spread between the asteroids like fog. Hidden in the plasma, the human ship became invisible to Vorthak sensors. When they emerged from the cloud, they were behind enemy lines, firing into the unprotected rear sections of alien vessels. Admiral Krickstall watched from his flagship as another of his ships exploded. The humans were using tactics that made no sense, weapons that shouldn't work, maneuvers that should have been impossible. "Analysis report," he demanded. "Sir, we cannot predict their movements," his tactical officer replied. "They appear to be making decisions randomly. Our computers cannot find any pattern to adapt to." "What about their weapons?" "They're using improvised munitions, mining explosives, industrial equipment, even kitchen utensils modified as projectiles. Our shields are designed to stop military weapons, not this." Krickstall studied the battle display. In 18 hours of fighting, the human ship had destroyed over 200 Vorthak vessels, nearly 10% of his entire fleet. The losses were unprecedented, unacceptable. But more troubling was how they had lost. The Vorthak Empire was built on the principle of technological adaptation. They studied enemy tactics, learned from them, and developed countermeasures. It was what made them unbeatable, except you couldn't develop countermeasures against chaos. "Sir, the human ship is moving again," reported a sensor operator. On his screen, Krickstall watched the Defiant emerge from behind a large asteroid. The ship was barely holding together, hull plates missing, one engine dead, weapon systems sparking with electrical damage. But it was still fighting. "They should have surrendered hours ago," Krickstall muttered. "Sir, nothing. Continue the attack." On the Defiant's bridge, Lieutenant Hyunjin Choi was working miracles with their failing systems. Half the control panels were dark, the artificial gravity kept flickering, and the air tasted of smoke and ozone. "Captain, we're losing life support on decks 4 through 6, reported Chief Engineer Minji Song. Her voice was hoarse from breathing smoke, and her uniform was stained with coolant fluid. "I can keep us running for maybe 2 more hours." Sunho nodded grimly. They had fought longer than anyone thought possible, but the ship was dying around them. More than half his crew was dead or wounded. The survivors were running on pure determination. "Incoming." "Transmission," called Communications Officer Jamin Park. "It's a Federation courier ship. The small vessel appeared on their sensors, racing toward the battle zone at maximum speed. It was transmitting emergency codes. Something important was aboard. "This is Dr. Shoyoung Nam," came a voice over the radio. "I have a package for Captain Lee, something that might help even the odds." The courier ship was fast but fragile. It would never survive long enough to dock with the Defiant, not with 3,000 enemy ships in the area. But Captain Sun-Ho Lee had an idea. "Tae-hyung, can you create another plasma cloud?" "Not with what we have left," the weapons officer replied. "But maybe—" He looked at the engineering displays. "If we overload the main deflector, it will create an electromagnetic pulse. Won't hurt the Vorthak ships, but it will blind their sensors for about 10 minutes. Will it damage our systems too? Probably. But we're already falling apart anyway." Sun-Ho made the decision. "Do it." The Defiant's main deflector dish glowed white-hot as Chief Engineer Minji Song poured every bit of remaining power into it. When it discharged, the electromagnetic pulse washed over nearby space like an invisible wave. Every sensor system within 50 kilometers went blind. Vorthak ships drifted helplessly, their biomechanical components temporarily stunned by the energy surge. In the confusion, the Federation courier ship reached the Defiant. Dr. Seoyoung Nam transferred across with a device that looked like a silver briefcase. "This is Project Prometheus," she explained to Captain Sun-Ho Lee. "It broadcasts human consciousness patterns, thoughts, emotions, creativity, everything that makes us human. In theory, it should disrupt the Vorthak biomechanical systems." "In theory? We've never tested it. And whoever operates it—" Dr. Nam paused. "The neural interface will probably kill them." Lieutenant Hyunjin Choi stepped forward. "I'll do it." "No," Sun-Ho said immediately. "I'm the captain. It's my responsibility." "With respect, sir, you're needed on the bridge," Hyunjin replied. "I mean, the tactical officer. This is just another weapons system." Before Sun-Ho could stop him, Hyunjin picked up the device and headed for the ship's communication array. Dr. Nam ran after him, explaining how to connect the neural interface. "The device amplifies human thought patterns and broadcasts them on all frequencies," she said as Hyunjin attached the neural crown to his head. "Focus on everything that makes us human. Our emotions, our chaos, our refusal to give up." Hyunjin smiled as the device powered up. "I can do that." The Prometheus weapon activated, sending waves of pure human consciousness through space. It was everything the Vorthak were not: unpredictable, emotional, creative, stubborn. The biomechanical ships, built for order and logic, reacted like living beings exposed to poison. Across the Vorthak fleet, ships began to malfunction. Navigation systems plotted impossible courses. Weapons fired randomly at empty space. Biomechanical. Hulls convulsed as if in pain. On the flagship, Admiral Krixtal watched in horror as his perfect fleet dissolved into chaos. "What is happening?" "Unknown energy field," reported his science officer. "It appears to be thoughts, raw consciousness. Our biomechanical systems cannot process it." The field was spreading, ship to ship, carried by the quantum communication links between vessels. Soon the entire Vorthak armada was affected, but the weapon was killing Lieutenant Hyunjin Choi. The neural feedback was burning out his brain, turning his thoughts into weapons against the enemy. He held on as long as he could, pouring his love for his wife and baby son, his loyalty to his captain, his hope for humanity's future into the device. "Tell them," he whispered over the intercom. "Tell them we were here. Tell them we held the line." The transmission ended as Hyunjin Choi died at his post, his sacrifice buying humanity a chance to survive. On the bridge of the Defiant, Captain Sun-Ho Lee watched the Vorthak fleet beginning to retreat. The Prometheus weapon had worked, but it wasn't enough to destroy them all. They would regroup, adapt, return with countermeasures unless someone stopped them permanently. Sun-Ho looked around his ruined bridge. Most of his crew was dead. The ship was dying. But they had proven something important. Humans could fight back. "Minji," he called to his chief engineer, "can you overload the reactor?" She understood immediately. "Yes, sir. But if we ram their flagship—" "I know. Sunho opened a ship-wide channel. All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for ramming speed. The Defiant's final charge began with a whisper. Captain Sunho Lee spoke quietly into his personal log as Chief Engineer Minji Song prepared the ship's reactor for overload. Around them, the bridge sparked with dying electrical systems, but his voice was calm and steady. Personal log, Captain Sunho Lee, final entry. We held them for 4 days. Not long enough to save everyone, but long enough to matter. To Yuna, if you ever hear this, Daddy kept his promise. The monsters won't reach your birthday party. He closed the log and looked around his ruined bridge. Of his original crew of 847, only 18 remained alive. Lieutenant Hyunjin Choi lay dead at his station, the neural crown of Project Prometheus still smoking on his head. But his sacrifice had worked. The Vorthak fleet was in chaos, their biomechanical systems poisoned by human consciousness. Minji, status report, Sunho called to engineering. Reactor overload in 60 seconds, came the reply. Once we start this, there's no stopping it. Through the viewports, the Vorthak flagship Dominator loomed like a dark mountain. Admiral Krixtal was trying to restore order to his fleet, but the Prometheus weapon had done its work. Ships drifted aimlessly, their crews struggling with systems that no longer obeyed commands. All remaining crew to escape pods, Sunho ordered. That's a direct command. Sir, the pods won't clear the blast radius in time, reported navigation. Officer Yun Soo Yoon, one of the few bridge crew still alive. Then we die together, Sunho said simply. But Earth lives. The Defiant turned toward the enemy flagship, her remaining engine pushing her forward on pure determination. She was a wreck, held together by emergency welds and stubborn human engineering, but she still had one last fight in her. On the Dominator, Admiral Krixtal finally noticed the approaching human ship. Destroy that vessel immediately. But his weapons crews were still struggling with systems contaminated by human thought patterns. Some guns fired at empty space, others wouldn't fire at all. The few shots that hit the Defiant barely slowed her down. The ship was already so damaged that a little more made no difference. Sir, they're on a collision course, reported a Vorthak officer. Krixtal stared at the approaching destroyer. In his long career, he had seen many desperate tactics, but nothing like this. The humans were turning their own ship into a weapon, sacrificing themselves to hurt the enemy. Why? He whispered. Why do they fight so hard? He would never understand. The Vorthak conquered because it was efficient, logical. They destroyed other species because it eliminated competition. But humans fought for something else entirely. For ideas that couldn't be touched, for people they would never meet, for a future they wouldn't live to see. The Defiant slammed into the Dominator's hull at half the speed of light. The explosion that followed lit up the entire star system. The destroyer's overloaded reactor turned both ships into a brief new sun, a brilliant flash that could be seen from worlds dozens of light years away. When the light faded, both vessels were gone. Admiral Krixtal, conqueror of 200 worlds, died instantly along with Captain Sunho Lee and the last crew of the Defiant. The loss of their flagship sent the remaining Vorthak fleet into full retreat. Without their admiral, affected by the lingering effects of the Prometheus weapon, they fled back toward their own territory. The invasion of Earth was over. 3 days later, Admiral Jiwan Han arrived with the main Federation fleet to find the threshold gate littered with wreckage. Over 200 Vorthak ships had been destroyed, their hulls cracked and broken. At the center of it all was the expanding cloud of gas and debris that had once been 2 flagships. Search for survivors, Admiral Han ordered, though she held little hope. They found 17 escape pods drifting among the asteroids. Chief Engineer Minji Song was the senior surviving officer, along with 16 other crew members who had managed to reach safety before the final explosion. The captain? Admiral Han asked when Minji was brought aboard the flagship. Minji's eyes were red with tears and smoke. He stayed at his post, ma'am. They all did. Lieutenant Hyunjin Choi died, operating that weapon Dr. Nam brought. Captain Lee rammed their flagship to make sure they couldn't regroup. Admiral Han was silent for a long moment, looking out at the debris field. 18 survivors out of 847 crew members? Yes, ma'am. But we held the line. News of the battle. A threshold gate spread across the galaxy faster than light. For the first time in their history, the Vorthak Empire had been defeated. Not just slowed or delayed, actually beaten by a single human ship. Other species that had been planning to surrender suddenly found their courage. The crystalline Kelthera, who had survived in hidden colonies, began attacking Vorthak supply lines. The Nexari started building new fleets. Dozens of conquered worlds rose in rebellion. On Earth, Captain Sun Ho Lee was buried with full military honors in the cemetery overlooking Seoul Harbor. His daughter Yuna, now 8 years old, placed a small toy spaceship on his grave. "Did Daddy stop the monsters?" she asked her mother. Yoonji Lee held her daughter close as they watched the honor guard fire their salute. "Yes, sweetheart. Daddy stopped the monsters." The memorial built at the Threshold Gate became a pilgrimage site for beings from across the galaxy. Species that had never heard of humans made the journey to see where a single ship had held the line against impossible odds. The inscription, written in 100 languages, read simply, "Here stood the crew of the Terran destroyer Defiant. They conquered worlds with ease, until this single human vessel held the line. Let the galaxy remember, some things are worth dying for." But the battle's real legacy was not carved in stone. It lived in the hearts of every species that had watched a small, primitive ship face down an empire and refuse to yield. It lived in the Vorthak commanders who now looked over their shoulders, wondering if their enemies might have the same crazy courage as the humans. Most of all, it lived in the growing coalition of free worlds that slowly pushed the Vorthak Empire back. World by world, system by system. It took 20 more years, but eventually the last Vorthak stronghold fell to combined fleets flying flags from a dozen species. When historians wrote about the fall of the Vorthak Empire, they all agreed on one thing. It began at the Threshold Gate when Captain Sun Ho Lee looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. The line had held. Earth was safe, and the galaxy learned what it meant to be human. In the end, that made all the difference.